Welcome to All-Time Epic Stories. Today, we present, the unseen architects of the Great Wall, minds that built an empire's shield. In the year 221 BCE, as Emperor Qin Shi Huang unified the warring states of China, history remembers his name in stone and earth. But behind every monument to power lies a truth rarely spoken: empires are not built by decrees alone. Deep within the archives of the imperial court, amid rolls of silk and bamboo slips, lived a different kind of warrior. These were men who fought with calculations instead of swords, whose battlefields were scrolls covered in measurements and celestial observations. Among them was Master Lu Qin, a hydraulic engineer whose understanding of water would prove more valuable than 1,000 cavalry units. His weathered hands had diverted rivers and tamed floods across 3 kingdoms. Lu Qin stood at the edge of the Ordos Desert, where the proposed wall would traverse terrain that had swallowed armies whole. The problem was not merely building a wall, it was building it where water was scarce and earth unstable. For 6 months, Lu Qin studied ancient texts on soil composition, methods forgotten since the Yellow River flood controls of centuries past. He discovered writings by engineer Gong Fong from the spring and autumn period, detailing earth stabilization techniques. The technique involved mixing local soils with glutinous rice paste, creating a mortar stronger than stone. But the challenge lay in producing enough rice paste to bind millions of earth bricks across 1,000 miles. Lu Qin proposed a revolutionary solution: establish rice cultivation stations every 50 li along the construction route. Each station would process local harvests into binding agent, creating a supply chain that moved with the wall itself. His counterpart in logistical genius was Minister Zhao Wei, a man who had coordinated grain distribution during the Great Famine of Zhao. Where others saw only the wall's length, Zhao Wei saw a living organism requiring constant nourishment. Zhao Wei calculated that 200,000 workers would consume 400 tons of grain daily. Traditional supply caravans could never match this demand across mountainous terrain. Innovation was not optional, it was survival. Drawing from the ancient well systems of the Western Zhou, Zhao Wei designed a network of fortified granaries, each positioned at strategic mountain passes. These would serve dual purposes: supply depots and defensive strongholds. But moving grain to these granaries presented its own impossibility. The mountain paths were too narrow for traditional ox carts, and human porters could not carry enough to sustain the workforce. Zhao Wei turned to an unexpected source: the shoe road builders of ancient Sichuan. Their plank road system, suspended on cliffside posts, had moved supplies through impassable terrain for 3 centuries. He adapted their methods, creating elevated supply routes that followed ridge lines, reducing travel time by half and protecting caravans from raiders in the valleys below. The wall would have its own circulatory system. Meanwhile, in the imperial workshops of Chang'an, master artisan Dong Yun faced an equally daunting challenge. The wall required bricks, millions upon millions of fired clay bricks, produced faster than any kiln system had ever achieved. Traditional kilns could fire perhaps 5,000 bricks weekly. The wall's construction required 50,000 daily. Dong Yun studied the problem with the precision of a physician diagnosing illness. The bottleneck was heat distribution and firing time. He discovered ancient Persian designs from the Silk Road traders, describing tunnel kilns that fired continuously rather than in batches. But adapting foreign technology to Chinese materials and scale would require complete reimagining. Over 18 months of experimentation, Dong Yun created the Dragon Kiln, a massive tunnel structure built into hillsides, where gravity fed unfired bricks through chambers of increasing heat, emerging hardened at the bottom. The innovation increased production 40-fold. More importantly, it could be replicated quickly using local materials and labor, creating a decentralized production network that followed the wall's advancement. Yet bricks and mortar were worthless without precise placement. This fell to surveyor General Meng Tian, whose mastery of ancient geomancy and mathematics would determine the wall's exact path across impossible terrain. Meng Tian inherited techniques from the Mahist school of philosophy, masters of defensive engineering and geometric calculation. Their texts described methods of measuring distances across valleys using shadow angles and star positions. But the mountains of the northern frontier presented challenges no textbook addressed. Peaks shrouded in mist for weeks, valleys where magnetic stones threw compass readings into chaos, terrain that shifted with seasonal freezes. Meng Tian devised a solution combining celestial navigation with ground markers. Stone cairns placed at precise intervals, aligned with specific stars, created a fixed reference grid independent of magnetic interference or weather. Each cairn was positioned using the principle of triangulation, taught by ancient astronomers who had mapped the heavens. What worked for charting stars could chart the Earth. Above and below were mirrors of precision. His survey teams worked 2 years ahead of construction crews, creating detailed maps marked with soil composition, water sources, optimal foundation depths, and defensive sight lines. The wall was designed before a single brick was laid. In parallel, medical officer Chen Ning confronted a crisis of human endurance. Construction workers in the high mountains suffered mysterious illnesses, breathlessness, bleeding gums, exhaustion that sleep could not cure. Chen Ning recognized these symptoms from ancient texts describing sailors on long voyages. The condition related to diet, something vital was missing from the workers' meals of millet and salted vegetables. She discovered writings by the legendary physician Bien Ke, mentioning foods that prevented such ailments: fresh fruits, certain wild plants, fermented vegetables. The connection was nutrition, though the mechanism remained mysterious. Chen Ning established medicinal gardens at every major camp, cultivating vitamin-rich vegetables and fruits. She trained workers to identify edible wild plants, transforming the landscape itself into pharmacy. Within months, the mysterious illness vanished. Productivity increased 30% as healthy workers replaced the constantly sick. The wall was being built not just with stone, but with preventive medicine. Yet even healthy workers faced the psychological toll of endless labor far from home. This fell to scholar Wei Zhao, tasked with maintaining morale across 200,000 displaced souls. Wei Zhao studied the methods of the ancient Duke of Zhou, who had maintained armies for decades through cultural programs. Music, poetry, and connection to heritage, these were weapons against despair. He established a system where workers could send carved message stones home monthly, creating communication across vast distances. Families received proof their loved ones lived, workers received news from home villages. More innovatively, Wei Zhao created rotating work assignments that allowed men from the same villages to work together, preserving community bonds. The wall was built not by isolated individuals but by transplanted communities. In the capital workshops, metallurgist Gao Feng wrestled with an equally human problem: tools. Bronze implements wore down quickly against mountain stone. Iron tools lasted longer but were prohibitively expensive to produce in needed quantities. Gao Feng studied the ironworking methods of the Chu smiths, legendary for creating superior weapons. Their secret lay not in the iron itself but in the carbon they added during forging, creating steel. But steel required specific charcoal types and precise temperature control, knowledge guarded by master smiths. Gao Feng spent 2 years learning these secrets, then adapted them for mass production. He designed standardized steel tool forms, picks, hammers, chisels, that could be produced in central forges and distributed along the wall route. Tool wear decreased by 2/3, dramatically accelerating construction pace. The transportation of these heavy tools required yet another innovation. Pack Master Sun Li, veteran of the Silk Road caravans, revolutionized the entire logistics train. Traditional ox carts, while strong, were painfully slow across mountain terrain. Sun Li proposed using yaks, native to high altitudes and sure-footed on narrow paths, combined with specially designed pack frames. He also revived the ancient relay station system from the Han Dynasty postal routes, small outposts where fresh pack animals and supplies waited, allowing continuous movement without exhausting any single team. These relay stations became more than logistical points, they evolved into communication nodes, medical stops, and rest havens. The wall's supporting infrastructure became as sophisticated as the wall itself. Winter posed the greatest engineering challenge of all. Architect Ning Bao studied how northern nomads survived bitter cold, how they built structures that preserved heat in howling winds. He discovered that the secret lay in double-wall construction with air space between layers, and in using south-facing slopes to capture maximum sunlight. These principles could adapt to barracks design. Ning Bao designed winter barracks that borrowed from both Chinese and nomadic traditions, thick walls facing north, large windows facing south, central fire pits with sophisticated ventilation systems. But construction itself could not pause for winter. Master builder Wang Fei developed cold-weather mortar formulas, mixing ash and lime with animal fat to prevent freezing, a technique adapted from ancient tomb builders. This allowed year-round construction in all but the most extreme conditions. What would have taken 20 years could now be completed in 5 years saved through innovation alone. Communication along the wall's length presented its own impossibility. Messages traveling by runner could take weeks. Battle warnings needed to travel in minutes, not days. Signal Master Liu Yan studied ancient beacon systems from the Warring States period, where fire towers communicated across regions. He expanded this into a sophisticated language of fire and smoke. Different combinations of fire and smoke colors indicated specific messages, enemy numbers, directions, urgency levels. Adding wet grass created white smoke, certain minerals produced colored flames. He established protocols where watchtowers were spaced precisely by sight line distance. A message could travel 500 miles in under 2 hours, faster than any horseman could ride that terrain. Water remained the perpetual challenge. Hydrologist Chen Wan studied ancient well-digging techniques from the Yellow River Plains, but mountain geology was entirely different, solid rock instead of alluvial soil. She discovered that local shamans had knowledge of water sources through observing plant growth and animal paths. What seemed like superstition was actually generations of empirical observation. Chen Wan created teams pairing shamans with her engineers, combining traditional ecological knowledge with technical well-digging capability. Success rates improved from 30% to 70%. She also designed cistern systems that captured rainwater and snowmelt, using gravity-fed channels to supply multiple work sites. The wall became self-sufficient in water, liberating it from vulnerable supply lines. Food production received equal innovation from Agricultural Minister Tao Ming. Feeding 200,000 workers required more than imported grain, it required local food production capacity. Tao Ming studied the terrace farming methods of the southern hill peoples, who had cultivated steep slopes for centuries. He adapted their techniques to northern conditions and faster-growing crops. He introduced crop rotation systems from ancient Zhou agricultural texts, alternating nitrogen-fixing beans with grain crops to maintain soil fertility. The mountains were being transformed into productive farmland. Within 3 years, wall construction camps were producing 40% of their own food needs. This reduced supply caravan requirements dramatically, freeing logistics for tools and materials. The psychological impact was equally important. Workers who grew their own food felt less like prisoners and more like settlers, building not just a wall but a new civilization in the mountains. Safety became the obsession of construction master Hua Gong, who had witnessed too many workers fall from scaffolding or be crushed by stones. Each death was not just human tragedy but lost expertise. He studied naval shipbuilding techniques, where ropes and pulleys moved massive masts. These same principles could move stone blocks safely while protecting workers from crushing injuries. Hua Gong mandated safety ropes for all workers on high walls, designed protective helmets from lacquered bamboo, and created work rotation schedules that prevented exhaustion-related accidents. Accident rates dropped by 60%. More subtly, worker morale improved when they saw their lives valued. Safety measures were not kindness, they were recognition of human worth. Education coordinator Fong Hui faced perhaps the most subtle challenge: knowledge transfer. The innovations created by experts needed to spread to tens of thousands of ordinary workers. She developed a system of master-apprentice training chains, where each innovation was taught to selected workers who then taught others. Knowledge multiplied geometrically rather than remaining concentrated. Fong Hui also commissioned simplified illustrated manuals for complex techniques, using pictures instead of text to overcome literacy barriers. The wall was being built by educated workers, not just directed ones. Astronomical navigator Qin Lu provided unexpected contributions through celestial observation. Knowing precise seasonal timing allowed perfect scheduling of weather-dependent construction phases. He calculated optimal times for mortar curing, for transporting materials before rains, for beginning foundations before ground freeze. The wall was built in harmony with celestial cycles, not against them. This astronomical precision also aided navigation across featureless desert sections where traditional landmarks didn't exist. Star positions became construction guidelines written in the eternal sky. Textile engineer Xiao Yun revolutionized worker clothing. Traditional cotton robes were inadequate for mountain cold, yet leather was too expensive and inflexible for construction work. She studied the layered felt clothing of northern nomads, discovering that trapped air provided insulation. She designed multi-layered worker uniforms combining cotton, felt, and silk in strategic patterns. The clothing also featured practical innovations: tool loops, reinforced knees and elbows, adjustable closures. Workers became more efficient, and seasonal illnesses decreased by 40%. Forestry manager Liang Wu confronted deforestation caused by massive timber needs for scaffolding, buildings, and fires. Unchecked, the mountains would be stripped bare within a decade. He implemented sustainable forestry from ancient Taoist land management texts, selective cutting, replanting programs, rotation zones. The wall project would not leave ecological devastation in its wake. Liang Wu also developed bamboo scaffolding systems that required less timber and grew back rapidly. Where permanent timber was needed, he used stone supports, preserving forests for future generations. Record keeper Shen Kuo understood that the wall's greatest legacy might not be physical but intellectual. He documented every innovation, every adaptation, every problem and solution encountered. His archives became the first comprehensive construction manual in Chinese history, complete with diagrams, material specifications, personnel management techniques, and problem-solving methodologies. These records ensured that future projects could learn from the wall's innovations. Knowledge would not die with its creators but would compound across generations, each building upon the last. Conflict resolution mediator Zhou Ping managed the inevitable disputes between work crews from different regions, each with their own methods and pride in their traditional techniques. Rather than imposing uniform methods, Zhou Ping organized competitions where different crews demonstrated their techniques. The best methods won through demonstration, not decree, creating buy-in rather than resentment. This approach fostered innovation rather than stifling it. Workers felt empowered to suggest improvements, knowing good ideas would be recognized regardless of their originator's rank or origin. Quarry master Jiang Bao transformed stone extraction from brutal labor into precise engineering. He studied how ancient tomb builders had cut massive stones without shattering them. The technique involved drilling precise lines of holes, inserting wooden wedges, then soaking them with water. As wood expanded, stones split cleanly along predetermined lines with minimal waste. This method reduced stone waste by 70% and eliminated dangerous hammer splitting that sent shards flying. The quarries became safer, more productive, and more sustainable. Bridge engineer Unsung confronted the challenge of spanning mountain gorges where wall sections needed to connect. Traditional wooden bridges would rot quickly in the harsh climate. He studied ancient stone arch techniques from Roman traders along the Silk Road, adapting them with Chinese structural principles. The fusion created arched bridges stronger than either tradition alone. These bridges became architectural marvels in their own right, proving that the wall was not merely defensive but also connected, linking mountains and peoples previously isolated. Weather predictor Yi Rong saved countless lives and prevented material waste through accurate forecasting. He studied cloud formations, wind patterns, and animal behaviors described in farmers' almanacs. His predictions allowed construction crews to seek shelter before storms, protected fresh mortar from rain damage, and scheduled large lifts during calm weather. Nature became ally rather than adversary. Cultural liaison officer Ren Fei managed relationships with local populations whose lands the wall crossed. Initial hostility transformed into cooperation through respectful engagement. She established fair compensation systems for land use, hired local guides and specialists, and incorporated local knowledge into construction planning. The wall became a shared project, not an imposition. Local shamans blessed construction sites, traditional festivals were observed, cultural practices were respected. The wall absorbed the spirit of the lands it traversed rather than trampling them. Efficiency expert Yuan Ji analyzed workflow patterns, identifying bottlenecks and inefficiencies invisible to those immersed in daily work. His detached observation revealed systemic improvements. He discovered that 40% of time was lost to workers waiting for materials or instructions. By redesigning delivery schedules and communication chains, productive time increased dramatically. Yuan Ji's innovations applied principles from ancient military logistics texts: anticipate needs before they arise, position resources where they'll be needed, eliminate redundant motion. Poetry master Tang Yin provided unexpected morale support through verse and song. He composed ballads celebrating worker achievements, elegies honoring those who died, songs connecting labor to meaning. His work transformed brutal labor into epic saga, individual workers into heroes. The wall was not just being built in stone but in story, myth, and cultural memory. These songs traveled back to home villages, carried by rotating workers. Families heard not of suffering but of accomplishment, not of servitude but of participation in greatness. Defensive strategist Colonel Ma Jun ensured the wall's design incorporated actual military functionality, not just symbolic presence. He studied centuries of border warfare tactics. He positioned watchtowers for overlapping fields of fire, designed beacon stations for rapid communication, incorporated sally ports for counterattacks. The wall was a living military system. Ma Jun also planned garrison rotation systems, supply caching, and rapid reinforcement routes. Future defenders would inherit not just stones but a complete defensive doctrine. Economic theorist Shang Yu calculated the wall's broader economic impacts. While costly to build, it would dramatically reduce border raiding losses and stabilize trade routes. His analysis showed that the wall would pay for itself within 3 generations through increased agricultural productivity in protected regions and secured Silk Road commerce. Monument architect Fan Li ensured that key wall sections incorporated aesthetic grandeur alongside functionality. The wall represented not just defense but civilization itself. He designed gates as monumental archways, incorporated decorative stone work at strategic points, created viewing platforms where the wall's grandeur could be appreciated. Function and beauty merged. Environmental monitor Chao Jun tracked the wall's ecological impacts, ensuring construction didn't trigger erosion, landslides, or watershed damage that would undermine the structure itself. He designed drainage systems that prevented water accumulation, planned vegetation barriers that stabilized slopes, and positioned construction to work with natural contours rather than against them. Legal scholar Jiang Yu codified labor laws protecting worker rights, maximum work hours, mandatory rest periods, injury compensation, fair payment schedules. The wall was built within ethical frameworks. These laws were radical for their time but practical. Protected workers were productive workers, and fair treatment reduced desertion and sabotage dramatically. After 15 years of construction, the wall stretched across mountains and deserts, a testament not to one emperor's will but to collective human ingenuity channeled toward monumental purpose. The unsung architects, engineers, doctors, farmers, scholars, had transformed theoretical knowledge into physical reality. Their innovations would echo through centuries in ways the wall itself could not. History would remember Qin Shi Huang's name carved in the wall's stones. But the wall's true foundation was knowledge, accumulated over millennia, refined through necessity, transmitted across generations. The greatest monument was not the wall itself but the demonstration that human problems, however vast, yield to systematic thought, collaborative effort, and willingness to learn from all sources. Future generations would build greater structures using principles refined during the wall's construction: hydraulic engineering, large-scale logistics, sustainable resource management, human-centered design. The wall stood as proof that civilization advances not through conquest or decree but through patient accumulation of knowledge and generous sharing of innovations across all barriers. The unseen architects of the Great Wall remind us that humanity's greatest achievements are never the work of one individual, but the synthesis of countless minds contributing their unique wisdom to shared purpose. Thank you for joining us on All-Time Epic Stories. If this journey into forgotten genius inspired you, please like, subscribe, and share these stories of human ingenuity with others who seek wisdom in history.